Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are absolutely diving into a massive paradigm shift when it comes to ambition and achievement. We're going to unpack the core concepts from Ryuho Okawa's book, The Laws to Achieve Eternal Success, specifically zeroing in on Chapter 1, The Law of Success, which lays out the foundational steps you absolutely need to achieve true lasting victory.
We constantly hear about how cutthroat the real world is, right? It's like this deeply ingrained belief that climbing to the top means you've got to sacrifice your own peace of mind, or worse, step on other people to get there. But we have to ask, is that really the only way? Does reaching your goals inherently require you to be ruthless?
To figure that out, we've broken this down into 4 key areas. First, we'll look at true success and happiness. Second, focusing on the happiness of many. Third, the role of guardian and guiding spirits. And fourth, cooperators and delegation. Let's get right into it.
Starting with our first point, true success and happiness.
Right out of the gate, this philosophy completely challenges a major modern assumption: the idea that success and happiness are the exact same thing. I mean, we all know people who achieve massive worldly status, right? Like top-tier politicians or elite CEOs. But so often, they totally sacrifice their families, their own mental peace, or the well-being of the people working under them.
And that brings up a really crucial distinction. Worldly success might mean you get that big promotion or close a massive deal, even if it leaves you feeling empty inside or, actively hurts someone else. But true success, it's fundamentally different. It's not just some victory lap at the finish line. The entire process of achieving it mutually generates happiness. It perfectly overlaps with a positive, uplifted state of mind for everyone involved.
Moving on to Section 2, the happiness of many.
This brings us to the first major principle in the text, known as rishi, which basically means establishing your core ambition. Here's the thing. If your baseline goal is purely to get rich or become famous by dragging other people down, you are completely missing the mark. Sure, that kind of worldly ambition might get you some short-term results through sheer brute force, but ultimately it just causes suffering. The book argues that your foundational goal absolutely must be tied to elevating the people around you. It's got to be an ambition to spread happiness, not just hoard it all for yourself.
Which naturally leads us into Section 3, guardian and guiding spirits.
Now we're jumping into the spiritual mechanics behind all this. This principle highlights that relying solely on your own earthly physical effort just isn't enough. There are unseen forces at work that we really need to align with.
Think about it like this. Just like you wouldn't want to hang around a super selfish, toxic person, high-level guiding spirits feel the exact same way. If you operate with a totally ego-driven mind, they're going to step back and essentially say, well, if you want to do things your own selfish way, do as you please. And man, that leaves you incredibly vulnerable to negative influences that match that lower frequency.
So how do you attract high-level heavenly guidance instead? The text gives us 3 clear elements. First, keep your ambition pure and large. Second, do the work with absolute sincerity, completely dropping those selfish motives. And third, maintain constant gratitude. Simply expressing heartfelt thanks to your unseen guides literally makes them want to support you even more. It's a game changer. And when you achieve success with this kind of pure mindset, it doesn't just give you earthly rewards. It literally expands what the book calls the vessel of your soul. You build this incredibly deep, enduring confidence that stays with you into the next life. By pushing through failure, you're gaining the leadership capacity to step up and actually rescue others.
All right, let's look at Section 4, cooperators and delegation.
This principle tackles the external, physical actions you have to take to bring those massive ambitions to life. Specifically, mastering the knack for employing and cooperating with others. Because, let's be real, no matter how ridiculously capable you are, massive success is never, ever a solo act.
You have to actively cultivate cooperators who genuinely resonate with your selfless ambition. If you're sitting there thinking you can do everything yourself, you're just kidding yourself. Large-scale work requires a huge network of support. We're talking about your boss, your colleagues, your subordinates, and absolutely, for sure, your family.
And here's why that is so absolutely crucial. Gathering cooperators doesn't just add to your power linearly, like 1 + 1 = 2. No, it multiplies it exponentially. Winning the genuine cooperation of a team multiplies your force by 3, 10, 100, or even 10,000 times. A great leader directing a massive team is literally outputting the energy of 10,000 people.
But to unlock those massive multipliers, you have to be able to recognize the unique talents of the people around you and actually delegate. It is such a common trap, holding on to all the work just because you know you're highly capable. But if you do that, your impact hits a really hard ceiling. You've got to find the right people, trust them, pass the work down, and free yourself up for higher-level strategy.
So, let's bring this all together. By setting a selfless ambition, purifying your mind to receive that unseen spiritual guidance, and mastering the practical art of multiplying your power through delegation, you effectively merge the physical and the spiritual into one master strategy. And according to the text, that is the true path to lasting, eternal victory.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take a really hard look at your own personal drive. Ask yourself, are your goals designed just to push you ahead, or are they built to elevate everyone around you? Because according to this framework, that is the ultimate dividing line between a temporary win and an eternal success.
Welcome to today's explainer. We're jumping right into Chapter 2 of Ryuho Okawa's philosophy on achieving what he calls eternal success. We're going to explore exactly how to win, but not just a quick one-off victory. We're talking about mastering both your internal mindset and your external competitive environment to win consistently over an entire lifetime.
So, let's kick things off with a question that might actually challenge how you think about success. Why is it that highly talented, quick-witted people so often fail to achieve long-lasting success? I mean, you'd think the smartest, fastest thinkers would naturally win out in the end, right? Well, the source text we're diving into today argues the exact opposite. It suggests that those quick thinkers frequently panic and completely fall apart when the tide turns against them.
As the original text lays out, getting to that level of eternal success requires a massive, fundamental shift in perspective. You really have to stop chasing those quick, tactical wins and start building long-term strategic endurance. It's entirely about surviving those inevitable rough patches that tend to break people who rely on nothing but a fast mind.
To figure out how to win the long game, we're going to look at why fast thinkers often get trapped, how to build an unmoving mind, a really fascinating metaphor about a drowning swimmer, and finally, how to outsmart your rivals by finding your own hidden flavor. Let's get right into it.
First step, let's talk about the trap of the fast thinker and why having a quick mind can sometimes be a huge liability.
Just look at the contrast here. On the one hand, you've got the fast thinker. Sure, they're absolutely brilliant in the moment, snagging all these short-term tactical wins. But the problem? Their emotions are on a total roller coaster, swinging wildly between joy and sorrow with every tiny victory or defeat. When a real crisis hits, they're the first to panic. On the flip side, you have the enduring strategist. They're totally focused on the large-scale victory. They might lose a few minor battles, but they stay emotionally grounded because they're playing the long game.
Because let's be real, when you're taking on massive projects or aiming for huge goals, you are absolutely going to face opposition. Things will go wrong. That's just a given. And if your happiness depends entirely on getting a win today, if you react emotionally to every single setback, the text argues you are basically guaranteeing your own failure. You need an anchor that's way deeper than just being quick on your feet.
Which brings us to a much better way to handle adversity, and that is cultivating what the text calls an unmoving mind.
The Japanese term used here is fudoshin, which translates to an unmoving mind. But hey, to be clear, it's not about just being stubborn or refusing to adapt. It's about developing an internal emotional shield, one forged through actual real-world experience, that allows you to endure extreme hardships. It means staying absolutely steadfast and refusing to get knocked off course by temporary negative circumstances.
Just think about how fudoshin completely shifts your timeline. A fast thinker wants results yesterday, and they freak out when things stall. But a true strategist armed with fudoshin, they're operating on a totally different wavelength. They are mentally prepared to hunker down and literally wait out a bad situation for 1, 2, 3, or even 5 years, just to secure that final victory.
It's kind of like a massive, deeply rooted tree. The market winds can howl, storms can rage, but the tree doesn't budge. And here's the coolest part. Because of that incredible endurance, the tree actually becomes a safe haven. It provides shelter for all those smaller, panicked individuals who are losing their minds over every minor tactical loss. By standing firm, you literally become the center of gravity.
Now, to really visualize how you put this into practice, the text uses a brilliant, completely counterintuitive metaphor.
Check out this quote. It says, "If you are about to drown, it is better to sink your head into the water. If you sink your head and stay still, you will float. Wait, what? It sounds crazy, right? When we're facing absolute ruin in business or in life, our biological instinct is to thrash around, to just do something, anything immediately. But thrashing in the water only makes you swallow it, exhaust yourself, and sink faster.
So why does sinking your head actually work? Well, it just comes down to biology and physics. The human body's specific gravity is about 0.9, which actually makes us slightly lighter than water. So if you literally just relax, do nothing, and wait, which is the very physical essence of Fudoshan, you will naturally float. You just have to endure until the hardship passes.
All right, so you've got your internal shield locked in. Now you have to look outward and focus on your external strategy, analyzing your rivals. To survive in a competitive environment, observing your rivals is absolutely critical. You have to study their strengths and adopt their successful methods just to level the playing field. But you also have to aggressively hunt for their weaknesses to identify the gaps in what they offer. Strengths and weaknesses are literally two sides of the same coin. So if you can spot those gaps, you can exploit them to create incredibly effective niche strategies.
The text gives a really fascinating real-world example of this. Not a high school in Japan. They basically dominated top-tier university acceptances. But it wasn't just a lucky break. They systematically leveraged a massive structural strength by using a combined 6-year junior and senior high curriculum. It was a profound advantage that all their rivals then had to analyze and figure out how to contend with.
But here's the catch. Just analyzing and copying isn't enough for long-term dominance. You have to find your hidden flavor.
Because even if you win today, resting on your laurels practically guarantees defeat tomorrow. Why? Because your rivals are eventually going to copy your hit products or services. It's inevitable. To survive, you must proactively develop what the text calls a hidden flavor, or kakushiaji. This means the true, absolute core reason for your continued success has to remain entirely invisible to the outside world.
Think about it like a magic trick. If your competitors cannot figure out why your product or method is such a massive hit, they can't reverse engineer it. And if they can't reverse engineer it, there is no way they can crush you. Building this unanalyzable core, this hidden flavor, is exactly what ensures your long-term dominance in a fiercely competitive market.
So, bringing it all together, we're looking at a 4-step cycle for continuous victory. Step 1, cultivate Fudoshin to completely secure your mind against panic. Step 2, use that unmoving mind to just endure the inevitable market storms. Step 3, once you're stable, meticulously break down your competitors' strengths and gaps. And finally, step 4, constantly develop your invisible, completely uncopyable hidden flavor.
I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. Think about your own life, your business, or even your closest rival. First off, do you actually have the internal strategic endurance, that Fudoshin, to simply wait them out when things go horribly wrong? And second, if you analyze them right now, do you know what their hidden flavor is? Because to achieve eternal success, you have to master that delicate balance between absolute internal peace and relentless external vigilance. Thanks so much for joining me on today's Explainer, and I'll catch you next time.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So I'm genuinely super excited you're joining me today because we are unpacking a truly fascinating section of our source material, Chapter 3, titled Polishing the Management Mind. You know, if you've ever felt kind of stuck in your career or your business, well, this explainer is absolutely for you. We're going to take a really close look at the hidden dangers of rigid thinking and how failing to adapt to a society that's, let's face it, constantly changing can quietly sabotage your success. Okay, let's dive right into this. I want to challenge you right off the bat here. Are you building for your customers or are you building for your ego? It's a tough question, right? Kind of makes you squirm a bit. But it's exactly the kind of uncomfortable reflection our source material demands if we actually want to grasp whose needs we're really serving when we create a product or, lead a team. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're looking at a clear 6-part framework. First, the rigid thinking trap. Second, constantly think and adapt. Third, breaking your business bottlenecks. Fourth, overcoming the producer ego. Fifth, the customer-first mindset. And finally, building a flexible culture. Let's get right to it. Section 1, the rigid thinking trap. The text refers to this really interesting concept called the management mind. What this essentially means is, well, it's basically your brain's approach to leading and operating in the world. And the source points out a pretty harsh truth here. If you're relying on fixed decisions that you made, say, 3, 5, or even 10 years ago, and you're just flat out refusing to change them regardless of what's happening around you, you're effectively disqualified as a leader. Your mind absolutely has to mirror the constant evolution of society. Moving on to Section 2, constantly think and adapt. So, to break out of that rigid thinking trap, the text gives us a great 2-step remedy. Step 1 is to constantly think. You do this by gathering external information literally every single day. You've got to keep your antenna up. Step 2 is balancing that big picture with the small details. Actually, the source specifically warns against something called sectionalism. This is basically when departments inside a company start fighting each other over petty, minor issues, and they completely lose sight of the overarching vision. A truly great leader stops those turf wars dead in their tracks, while still catching those tiny, crucial mistakes that could otherwise sink the whole ship. Okay, let's hit Section 3, breaking your business bottlenecks. Honestly, this is one of the most eye-opening parts of the text for me. As a business scales, say beyond 50 or 100 people, every single stage of growth creates a new bottleneck. And here's the kicker. Sometimes the leader is the biggest bottleneck. Think about it. A founder who insists on doing absolutely everything themselves, doing the hiring, checking the accounting, micromanaging the sales team, eventually they become the very thing blocking progress. To scale, you literally have to evolve your approach and just let go of the reins. Which brings us to Section 4, overcoming the producer ego. There's a really stark contrast we need to look at here. A producer-centric view is completely inward-facing. It's assuming your product is the best simply because you made it. The text uses a really great Japanese term here, becoming a tengu, which essentially means becoming arrogant and self-centered. A market-centric view, on the other hand, is humble. It asks the really tough question, why would a customer choose an alternative over me? It's a massive, fundamental shift from what you want to build to what the market actually needs. All right, Section 5, the customer-first mindset. Notice this explicit, non-negotiable rule highlighted from the text. Never forget the customer mind. We have to completely step out of our own shoes, abandon the arrogance of the creator, and step directly into the user's shoes. And I know it's incredibly easy to say, but shockingly hard to practice on a daily basis. I absolutely love this quote from the source. Finally, ask the market. The author uses a brilliant metaphor here, comparing the market to a report card. It's like, just like politicians have approval ratings, your business has a report card, and the market is the only teacher holding the red pen. If your product isn't selling, your report card is telling you loud and clear that something is wrong, and there's no amount of ego that can argue with those grades. And that brings us to the 5th point of this framework, which redefines a term we hear all the time, added value. The text clarifies that added value isn't just the product itself. No, it's the cumulative joy and satisfaction experienced by the end user. It's the sum total of everything, from the initial product planning, to the manufacturing, the distribution, right down to the end customer service. If any one of those links breaks, your total added value just plummets. Finally, Section 6, building a flexible culture. The text beautifully contrasts a rigid, bureaucratic company with a flexible one. Imagine a bureaucratic company. They get a customer complaint, they completely ignore it, and they just try to force their product onto the market anyway. It's painfully slow and completely top-down. But a flexible, customer-first organization, the entire organization reacts. They adapt. Management's customer-first culture literally permeates every single level, from the CEO all the way down to the frontline workers. Everyone shares that exact same awareness. So the crucial takeaway here is this 5-part framework for polishing the management mind. Let's lock this in real quick. 1, constantly think and gather information. 2, balance the big picture vision with the small details. 3, identify and resolve your bottlenecks, even if, or maybe especially if that bottleneck is you. 4, adopt the customer mind by truly stepping into their shoes. And 5, relentlessly increase added value across the entire customer experience. This framework brilliantly illustrates exactly what it takes to polish that management mind. So I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to chew on today based on our explainer. What is the biggest bottleneck holding your market report card back today? Is it rigid thinking? Is it a producer ego? I encourage you to take a really honest look at your processes today and ask the market. Thank you so much for learning with me, and I absolutely can't wait to explore more incredible topics with you next time. Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Whenever the word recession hits the news, the immediate reaction is almost always fear. right? We tighten our belts, maybe we panic buy a bunch of stuff, and we just brace for impact. But what if we completely flipped that script? Today, we're diving into some seriously profound source material, specifically Chapter 4 of The Laws to Achieve Eternal Success, to explore a totally different paradigm. We're going to look at actionable countermeasures against a recession, ways to transform all that economic anxiety into an absolute launch pad for your future.
So here's the big question. Is a recession actually a curse, or is it a hidden opportunity? We default to anxiety, sure, but what if we've got it all wrong? It's a massive shift in perspective. When times are good, literally everything sells, right? Everyone looks successful. But a downturn? That is when the noise finally clears. It's this rare chance to strip away all the superficial fluff and focus on what actually matters, both for your personal growth and your business.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit 1. The reality of recession. 2. The ultimate investment, yourself. 3. Rediscovering inner wealth. 4. Pruning the unnecessary. 5. Fulfilling true societal needs. And finally, 6. Planting future seeds. All right, Section 1, the reality of recession. Let's look at the paradigm shift that happens when an economic bubble actually bursts.
The original source material frames these rough patches as a profound transitional period. A recession isn't just a sad little dip in a stock chart, it's a massive, structural transition in society. And transitions, well, they demand new challenges, not just cowering in fear.
You see, holding on to outdated methods during a downturn, that only makes our insecurity worse. People rush to these traditional safety nets, stuffing cash under the mattress or playing it hyper safe. But relying on overly conservative financial moves right now doesn't give you security. It just gives you this sort of anxiety paralysis. We've got to break that paralysis. Moving right along to Section 2, the ultimate investment, yourself. Now, this is the source's absolute most powerful countermeasure. There is a super stark contrast between just leaving your money in a bank and actually investing in your own skills. The source text uses this fantastic phrase. It compares bank interest during a recession to sparrow's tears. Basically, it's incredibly tiny, practically zero. If you just leave your resources sitting there because you're scared, they just stagnate. But self-investment? Man, that compounds so rapidly. Let me put that into perspective. The text notes that investing, say, 1,000,000 yen into your own self-development can multiply its value many times over. Imagine taking that capital and using it to read, learn totally new skills, or snag some new qualifications. Because when the economy eventually recovers, and it always recovers, right? You aren't just sitting where you started. You're a high-value asset, and your worth has completely skyrocketed while everyone else was just kind of standing still. Okay, Section 3, rediscovering inner wealth. This is all about looking inward when the external economy slows down. Think about a booming economy for a second. Everyone is super focused on outward expansion, vanity, acquiring more and more stuff. A recession acts as a necessary brake on that crazy materialistic runaway train. It essentially forces us to stop and rediscover family, inner reflection, and our spiritual values. It's the perfect time to ask yourself, hey, what's actually valuable in my life when all the easy money disappears? This period of quiet, inner reflection is what truly polishes the mind. By stepping back from purely materialistic goals, you develop a much deeper, far more attractive character. The text argues, and I love this, that the folks who use this time to build a rock-solid inner character, they're the exact ones who become capable of leading the masses in the future. All right, Section 4. Pruning the unnecessary. Let's take that reflective mindset and apply it straight to auditing your business. Here's the thing. A recession is absolutely not an excuse for failure. It's a Zen koan. The source text beautifully compares an economic downturn to this sort of spiritual, paradoxical riddle designed to test you. It's challenging you to figure out, can your company transform its very core constitution to survive and even thrive? You can't just point fingers at the bad economy. You have to solve the riddle of your own inefficiencies. To do that, you have to be a ruthless auditor. You need to identify your weak points and cut the bubble products. The stuff that only succeeded because money was easy. Cut those and strengthen your absolute core competencies. Sure, it feels a bit painful in the moment, but it completely transforms a fragile, bloated company into a streamlined powerhouse that can survive literally any test. Section 5. Fulfilling true societal needs. Let's see how providing real, undeniable value becomes your best external strategy. During a downturn, consumers become incredibly strict with their money. wallets are tight, so people aren't just throwing cash at frivolous things anymore. If you acknowledge these strict new standards, discard all the fluff that lacks true demand, and ruthlessly pursue what society genuinely needs, well, that's how you align your business with reality. Because at the end of the day, true value isn't determined by a booming economy. It's determined by fulfilling authentic human needs. If your business is rooted in providing real value, a recession simply proves your worth. As long as humanity is around, the need for genuinely valuable goods and services is never going to disappear. So think of a recession as a giant filter. It removes all the noise and leaves only the authentic, high-value stuff standing. Which brings us to Section 6, Planting Future Seeds. This is how we pivot from just surviving to actually dominating the future. The source text emphasizes that top management, and really, individuals too, cannot afford to get buried in daily routine tasks right now. You've got to keep your antennas up. You need to look 5, maybe even 10 years down the road. Revise how your business fundamentally operates, and above all, cultivate a totally fresh entrepreneurial spirit. You have to be hypersensitive to the shifting era and actively gather intelligence about what the world is going to need next. Just remember, we are in a massive era of transition. Those who take this time to polish themselves and actively plant new seeds, they are the ones who will reap the massive rewards later. It's out of these times of immense struggle and shift that the giant enterprises and the greatest inventors of tomorrow actually emerge. There's a quote from the text that perfectly captures this whole message. What are the seeds for the next era's business? We must discover and nurture them. Think about it. A recession is essentially winter. And what do you do in the winter? You don't just freeze and wait around. You diligently prepare the soil. You discover and nurture the seeds for the coming spring. By the time the economy warms up again, your seeds will already be sprouting while everyone else is just barely waking up. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to chew on this. The external economy? Yeah, that might be totally out of your control. But your internal growth and your strategic clarity, those are entirely in your hands. So how will you use this profound opportunity to grow stronger for the next era? What specific seed of self-investment are you going to plant today? Let that question guide you, and go turn this time of transition into your absolute greatest advantage.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an idea that honestly completely flips the script on how we measure achievement. We're asking a pretty big question. What does it really take to build a success that lasts? Not just a quick win, but true, enduring success. We're going to explore a framework that argues real victory isn't about crushing your competitors this quarter. It's about achieving what's called the ideal state. Let's just get right into it.
So think about this for a second. What if the secret to lasting success relies just as much on who you marry as it does on your business strategy? It's a wild thought, right? We're taking a huge step away from the usual hustle culture today. You know, normally when we talk success, we jump straight to profit margins, scaling, productivity hacks, all that stuff. But the source material we're looking at takes a much more holistic approach. It actually suggests that if your personal foundation is built on fleeting desires, well, your professional empire is pretty much doomed to collapse.
Our explainer today is grounded in Ryuho Okawa's The Laws to Achieve Eternal Success. This book lays out a truly fascinating philosophy. It argues that true success isn't just a temporary financial spike or, a stroke of good luck. Instead, it defines success as an eternal condition. It's a state of being that bridges this world and the next. It's all about building character and a life that endures way beyond the immediate moment.
To get to this eternal success, the author starts surprisingly small, like micro-level small. It's so interesting because he argues you literally cannot achieve a macro-level ideal state in your career if your personal life is a total mess. And the absolute most critical personal choice you're going to make, according to the text, it's your life partner.
Now, the author makes a very sharp, very deliberate distinction here between romantic love and marital love. Think about romantic love for a minute. It's this subjective peak, right? Driven by intense, fleeting passion that honestly often burns out pretty early on. Marital love, though, that's a completely different beast. It requires a cold, clear, truly objective understanding of the other person. It demands intellectual balance and the actual practical capacity for long-term coexistence. Basically, it's a massive shift from purely subjective feeling to an objective partnership.
The source gets incredibly specific, and honestly a little blunt about this. It specifically warns against choosing a partner solely on physical appearance. I mean, imagine marrying someone who looks like Miss Universe, just for the aesthetic, only to sit down at dinner and realize there is absolutely zero foundation for a real conversation. That's exactly where objective wisdom has to override subjective passion.
It's crazy that this crucial choice isn't taught in schools, because it dictates your entire life's trajectory. The text also throws in a warning that an excessive focus on dual careers can sometimes severely strain this intellectual bond, which can lead to discord or even infidelity. The end goal has to be deep mutual understanding.
Okay, so you've built a rock-solid personal foundation based on objective understanding. That is step one. But what happens when the world throws a massive curveball? Let's zoom out from the living room to the boardroom and look at how we can weather the inevitable hardships in business without entirely losing our footing. Because, let's face it, no matter how prepared you are, the storms are going to come.
To explain this, the author uses a brilliant, completely counterintuitive metaphor for economic hardship. He compares it to drowning. Think about human instinct for a second. When you're drowning, your immediate, totally natural reaction is to panic, right? You thrash around, you fight the water. But as the text points out, thrashing just makes you swallow water and sink even faster. The life-saving move, the counterintuitive move, is actually to sink your head, let the water's natural buoyancy lift you up, and just wait patiently.
So, translating that to business, the crucial move during tough economic times is to develop what the author calls an immovable heart. Instead of forcing aggressive, panicked moves during a recession, we need to act like a deeply rooted tree. It's a vital progression from absolute panic to quiet patience. You endure the immediate threat without making fatal, reactive mistakes.
In this patience, it isn't just about waiting out the weekend. We are talking about strategic endurance. The author notes that having the discipline and the character to weather a storm for 2 to 3 years without forcing a premature move, well, that is the absolute hallmark of a truly great leader. While everyone else is exhausting their resources thrashing around in the water, the leader with an immovable heart quietly endures, just waiting for the perfect moment to emerge with this deeply rooted resilience.
But here's the thing. Surviving the storm is only half the battle. What happens when the sun comes back out and growth resumes? How do we prevent our renewed ambition from becoming a destructive force? This brings us to the core focus of the text's 5th chapter. We're zooming all the way out to the macro level to discuss the ideal state of a successful business. And, spoiler alert, it requires that exact same objective wisdom we just talked about needing in a marriage.
Just like in a relationship, business requires a fiercely objective view. The text warns that simply declaring, hey, my store and products are the best, is nothing but a subjective delusion. True success means evaluating your operation with the cold, hard reality of the open market. You have to recognize the reality of your own limits and the actual, measurable value you are providing to other people.
Chapter 5 is all about this ideal state. And to see this objective wisdom in action, the author points directly to the legendary steel magnate Andrew Carnegie. Let's look at his philosophy. Carnegie's famous epitaph proves a really vital point. It reads, "Here lies a man who knew how to enlist the service of better men than himself. Reaching the ideal state isn't about doing everything yourself because your ego tells you to. It's about using objective wisdom to acknowledge your own limits. Then you go out and gather people who are actually more capable than you are, and you empower them. It's the ultimate realization that true growth means stepping entirely outside your own subjective ego."
The text is incredibly direct about what happens if we lack this objectivity. We fall right into the trap of subjective greed and blind optimism. The author points out that while a glass-half-full mentality is perfectly fine for a single person going about their day, applying it to something like a massive national debt is just incredibly irresponsible. He also reminds us to look objectively at big institutions. Like, remember that powerful banks aren't magical wealth creators. They are literally running on debt management using citizens' borrowed money. Excessive, unchecked greed that completely disconnects from reality, it will always eventually destroy the organization. Always.
Which finally brings us to the ideal state, or Arabeki Sugata. The ideal state is reached only when we balance our intense ambition for development with deep, objective wisdom. Again, it's the exact same objective wisdom required to choose a life partner built on mutual understanding. It means keeping our personal and our organizational greed totally in check. And why? So that the true wealth we generate doesn't just sit hoarded in a subjective silo, but actually circulates outward to genuinely uplift and benefit all of society. That's the whole point. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really look at the foundations you're laying right now in your own life. Are you building your relationships and your business on the fragile ground of subjective passion? Or are you ready to cultivate that immovable heart and the objective wisdom needed for the ideal state? Because the storms will inevitably come. When they do, will your success be eternal? Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep striving for that enduring wisdom.